Yes, ma'am.
She was scientific training. How could they invent Wi-Fi way back then?
Well, they didn't invent Wi-Fi. She invented her input to wireless communication was what she listened, what she had heard her husband talking about in the 1930s at the dinner table, night after night after night. She was a trophy wife, and she sat there listening to these conversations. When she got with George Antile, with his musical background, his musical training, he worked out a 88-key piano roll type system that would send out messages. The thing was, let's try to invent something to receive those messages. And Haiti worked on that part of it. No, they had no idea what Wi-Fi was in those days, or cell phones, or anything else. But when they did readdress that patent, they saw the nucleus of what they were looking for. And eventually, they did become Wi-Fi and cell phones. Yes, ma'am?
First of all, I want to say that I really think she was the most beautiful woman that ever lived.
Oh, yes.
And when I watched her pictures, I did get distracted by her beauty, because I really didn't concentrate that much on the picture. It was her and what she looked like. But I also wanted to say that a couple of years ago, they had a documentary, maybe you saw it. It was on the CUNY network.
Yes.
The Sun, it was very interesting. The Sun did a
Anthony.
documentary involving his mother. It was so interesting.
Colin Hetty Lamar.
Yeah.
That is an interesting documentary. There is a better documentary, Secrets of a Hollywood Star, and it has a lot more documentary footage in it. I don't mean to demean calling Hedy Lamarr. I looked at Hedy Lamarr. It disturbed me for some reason when I watched it, because some things were taken out of context. Some film footage was taken out of context. And as a matter of fact, when I began this book, I spoke with some gentlemen who thought, oh, she's a Warner Brothers character, and I thought, no, she wasn't. This footage was of an elderly woman with a sense of humor, not a lady who was Norma Desmond. It's interesting that you said what you did about watching Hedy Lamarr. I read in the newspaper when we got here yesterday. I live in the Twin Cities, and when we got here yesterday, I read about things to do in New York on Friday night, and one was to come see Stephen Michael Scher, or hear Stephen Michael Scher talk about Hedy Lamarr. I lived in this city for almost 30 years, and never had I been a thing to do before. And I was quite flattered about that. But I also read that Stephen Scher will read from his book. Well, I didn't have any intentions of reading from my book, but I will. I've got just one thing I want to say about Hedy Lamarr, and Robert Osborne put it. I put it in the epilogue of the book. You can read it later, but Robert Osborne, who knew her very well, did write. She was also a better actress than she was ever given credit for, but she had that curse that all those beautiful women had. Nobody could see beyond that. I think she did many things, many interesting things, and for anyone to think that's easy, what she did has never been in front of a camera and a whole crew and all that. And she's very, very good, and was always good. She particularly was wonderful because she did what was needed for the women she portrayed. And I thought that was very accurate, dead-on evaluation of her work. And coming from Robert Osborne, who did know her, especially during the trial in the 1960s, which I didn't talk about, it's in the book. The trial in the 1960s, he was there by her side before her being acquitted. And so he knew her, and I've acted in front of camera before, and it is not an easy task. It is very difficult. A lot was expected of Hedy Lamarr, and she did deliver. Any other questions? Yes.
Well, I just had a quick comment too, but like I discovered her when I was a really little child.
Yeah.
My dad was a minister, and he would only let us watch religious stuff, so Samson and Delilah. Samson and Delilah was one of the first movies that I ever saw, and that's kind of when I really got interested in her. And I've read a lot of different books, like her autobiography and some of the fluff, but I finished a book not too long ago that was written about her, and the author said that Disney first Catwoman off of her. And not reading your book yet, I was just wondering, was that true, or was there any?
Well, I didn't find it true, and I didn't put it in the book. It could very well be true, but so much was written, so much fluff, and so many myths have been perpetuated, especially after her autobiography, Unquote. Ecstasy in Me came out because, yes, you can hear moments of Haiti talking in the book, but about 9/10 of that book is fiction, and it has been perpetuated and perpetuated over and over again. I know the book you're talking about, and thank you for not mentioning the title. That particular book, I don't know the woman who wrote that book, and it does perpetuate a lot of myth. And it's funny that you would say that you watched Samson and Delilah. Your folks would let you watch Samson and Delilah because that movie is just wrought with sexual overtones. And Cecil B. DeMille, he knew how to throw in a good orgy and then, you know, condemn everybody at the end of the movie so everybody will feel good who watched it. It is good stuff. It's great escapism. Yes.
I wanted to ask, is there a leading man of Lamar's day that she never worked with that you would have liked to see her work with, and what would have made them so good for each other?
I would have loved to have seen her work with Humphrey Bogart in Casablanca because she, Hedy Lamarr, God bless her, she was up for Laura, she was up for Casablanca, she was up for Whom the Bell Tolls. The other day I was watching Selznick's god-awful Lust in the Dust.
Duel in the Sun.
Duel in the Sun.
Yeah.
And she was actually up for that part. Teresa Wright's husband actually owned that property at one point, and he wanted to start Teresa Wright in that movie, but she got pregnant. Well, then they offered it to Hedy Lamarr, and she got pregnant. He said, I had nothing to do with that. She was...
And was that true?
That was true.
That he had nothing to do with it?
No, she didn't. He didn't have anything to do with that. But there were a lot of films that that she was up for that she didn't do. A lot of it was her own choice. But Casablanca, certainly, that she was the original choice for Ilsa. And she was, of course, Bogart wasn't the first choice. I think George Raft was. But they really wanted Haiti, but Louis B. Mayer wouldn't let her go at that time. So, John.
Curious, she started her career in Europe,
Yes.
which had a different tradition of director-artist interaction.
Right.
She comes over and gets hit with the Louis B. Mayer machine. How did she interact with the directors she had to work with?
Well, she barely understood them. She had trouble with the English language, but she always wanted to be a film actress. She was very pampered, very spoiled, and she loved and ate everything that was American during her young years in Austria and Germany and Czechoslovakia.
So she never tried to get artistic control over her
She
work?
certainly did, John. As soon as her MGM contract ended, she said, enough of that, I want to control my career, and she did become a producer. She did 2 films. One that my friend Watson Bosler particularly likes, what was the name of that?
The Strange Woman.
At any rate, there were 2 films that she did, and they didn't do very well, but she realized that the studio possibly was her best gambit to continue her career, and so she signed contracts with other studios. But no, she didn't fancy herself knowing more than these men. But like I said, she didn't suffer fools, and she knew Louis B. Mayer was mishandling her terribly. And so when that contract ended, she went on to other things. Yes?
What was the story on Ecstasy in Me? Did she write it? Was it ghostwritten? What was the controversy?
The story is she sat down and was interviewed for that book. No, she actually didn't write it herself. But the 2 authors who interviewed her, conducted the interviews, and then actually wrote the book for her, took quite a few liberties, obviously, because I did a radio thing this morning, and the gentleman who interviewed me asked about the same question, and I said to him at that time, Hedy Lamarr was a lady, and people who knew her knew that she was very human, and she had affairs, and she had this, that, and the other, like, and a beautiful woman, go figure, you know, that's possible. But she would never talk about it. And when I reread Ecstasy in Me 40 years later, when I began this book, because I read it when I was a kid, when I reread the book, you could tell it was blatant what was obvious and what wasn't obvious truth. Bob Osborne was there when she finally read the manuscript. Her capriciousness, the word he used, was that she always wanted the security of money. And she signed that contract, signed the sign-off on that book without ever having read it.